Hi guys! So as most of you know, I usually teach French on my channel, but today I wanted to do something a little bit different. A lot of you have been asking me how best to learn the language, like in what order should you learn it? Should you start with pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar? What should you start with basically? And also some of you have been asking me if I have tips on how best to memorize new vocabulary or basically how best to learn the language and remember what you've learned. So I thought that today I would address all those questions and give you some advice from personal experience. As most of you know, English is not my first language, so I actually learned it as a foreign language myself. But bear in mind that as this is all from personal experience, you may find that some of the advice I give may be more or less relevant to your particular needs or your particular learning style. So try all the different techniques that I give you and then just carry on doing what works best for you. So, number one, no matter what language you're learning, the first thing you're going to want to learn is the alphabet. And this may be an alphabet that is completely different to your own, depending on what your first language is and what your target language is. So you may also need to learn how each sound in the language is represented if the alphabet is different to your own. The main reason you need to learn the alphabet first is because it's going to help you greatly when you're learning the pronunciation. So second, once you've grasped the alphabet, you need to move on to learning basic words and basic phrases. So for words, I would start with colors, numbers, the days of the week, the months, that kind of stuff. And for phrases, I would concentrate on learning how to greet people, learning how to present yourself, like my name is, I am, whatever age, that kind of stuff. There are 4 reasons why I think that learning basic words and phrases second is a good idea. Firstly, it's going to help you get a better grasp of the pronunciation than learning the alphabet did. Secondly, it's going to help you get an idea of the grammar of the language. Thirdly, it's going to help you learn some basic vocabulary. And fourthly, can you say fourthly? And fourthly, it's going to give you a sense of achievement. One thing I'd say though is that when you're learning those basic words and phrases, make sure that you can listen to those words and phrases spoken by a native speaker, because there is nothing worse than feeling like you're learning a lot of new words and that you're progressing and that you can communicate with native speakers and then they can't understand a word of what you're saying because you're not pronouncing it anywhere near the way that they would pronounce it. So that's a definite tip. Always learn the pronunciation from a native speaker. So, once you're confident with your basic words and phrases, you need to move on to learning pronunciation. And again, always learn pronunciation from a native speaker. That is so important. The reason I think it's best for you to learn the pronunciation before you learn more vocabulary is because if you've learned the pronunciation, when you learn more words, you're going to memorize them with the correct pronunciation, and therefore when you say you go abroad, for example, you're not going to come into the problem that we talked about before where you talk to natives and they can't understand you. Also, once you've learned the correct pronunciation, you can learn new words on your own, say even from a dictionary. You don't necessarily need to hear them spoken by a native because you'll already know how they're pronounced. So, do not neglect pronunciation because there is little point in learning any more vocabulary if people can't understand what you're saying. So number 4, once you've mastered pronunciation, or at least you feel more confident with it, you can start learning new words and you should also learn grammar alongside it. But bear in mind that there is no point at this stage to learn new words that you think you may not need. Just concentrate on words of interest. Regarding grammar, what I would advise you to do is to first learn the verb to be and to have in your target language in the present, in the past, and in the future. This is basically because they're the most common, and in a lot of languages they are actually used as helping verbs, to conjugate more complex tenses, so that's why it's very important to have them down. So make sure you learn the rules for conjugating verbs in different tenses, mainly the present, the past, and the future. You can leave the more complex or compound tenses, if your target language has them, for a bit later, when you're a bit more advanced and you're confident with the basic tenses. After that, I'd advise you to learn 30 to 50 of the most common verbs in the infinitive in your target language, because you'll already have learned the rules for conjugating them, so you don't really need to go over each one individually in every tense, because you will know how to conjugate them. However, bear in mind that some of the most common verbs in your target language could be irregular, so in which case those will need to be learnt by heart. And finally, once you've got a fair few verbs under your belt, move on to other areas of grammar, such as, for example, word order, and make sure you carry on learning new vocabulary all the time and practicing it, because if you don't practice it, you lose it. And that is a fact. It's not nice to say, but it is a fact. So, let's move on to the fun part. How can you increase your vocabulary? I've actually heard of people labeling things in their home to learn what different pieces of furniture or different electric appliances are called. So you could do that. You could also make flashcards where on one side you'd have the picture of, say you were learning the names of animals, you'd have the picture of the animal on one side and what it's called on the other. So then you look at the image and you try to guess what it's called from memory, and then you turn it around and you see if you got it right or not. And if you got it wrong, then practice again and again and again till you get it right. You could also watch videos on YouTube for free, but make sure they're from native speakers. That will be worth its weight in gold, trust me. You can find a lot of vocabulary videos in many languages on YouTube, all for free obviously because it's on YouTube. You could also write words multiple times if that helps you memorize words easier. You could learn words that belong to the same family. For example, if I was learning English, I could be learning the words possibly, possible, possibility, all at the same time, and then it's easier to remember them and what they mean. You could also learn words by categories, like I've just discussed about the flashcards. You could learn all the animals, you could learn all the family members at the same time. That should also help you, especially if you're watching a video on the subject or if you're making flashcards. And one thing that I did, not necessarily with vocabulary, but mostly when I was learning the tenses, is keep repeating and repeating and repeating the words and chant them if you like. Like, I'm learning Spanish at the moment, but I learned it many years ago at school, and I find that what I did back when I was at school, which was I would chant the conjugated verbs, I find that it was very useful because the fact that I chanted them, I still remember them all these years later, despite the fact that I didn't particularly practice it. But for vocabulary, you must use it because you will lose the vocabulary if you do not use it, and that is a guarantee. So use your vocabulary, practice, practice, practice. If you're a visual learner, having a picture dictionary may be of help to you, because then you'll be able to associate the words with the picture and learn it more effectively. To improve your pronunciation, what you can do is you can watch pronunciation lessons on YouTube. Again, that will be for free, so it's much better in my opinion than subscribing to a paid course, because usually if the teachers on YouTube are serious, you will get similar value, but you don't have to fork out for it. So in my opinion, that's always a bonus. You could also listen to audiobooks. There is a website from Amazon that has a lot of audiobooks listed. I'll leave that website down below if you're interested. So you could get some, listen to them. That will help you with the pronunciation. It will help you with your understanding. Really, listening to audiobooks should help you with every aspect of the language. You should also speak with natives if you can, because listening to them again will help your pronunciation. And you should try and watch movies in your target language if you can. You probably can find some on YouTube. I often look for films in Spanish on YouTube because that's the language I'm learning, and I can usually come up with something. Chances are you can come up with a film or a documentary or something in your target language on YouTube. If you can't find films, maybe you could look for vlogs on YouTube in your target language. That might help as well. And again, for your pronunciation, in order to get it down and remember it and become proficient at it, you need to practice, practice, practice. If you only take one thing from this video, it needs to be that you need to practice as much as possible. To learn the grammar, what you can do is either watch lessons on YouTube from native speakers. You can also buy grammar books in your target language and study them. And you must do exercises because again, that comes down to practicing. And the more exercises you do, the more you're gonna learn the rules, and basically the more it's gonna sink in. So how should you practice? In this section, I'm going to give you advice mainly based on what I did when I was learning English. You should speak to native speakers as much as possible and ask them to correct you if you make mistakes. Don't be ashamed of the mistakes you make because everyone makes mistakes when they're learning a language. It's just part of the learning process, and if you don't make mistakes, you're not going to learn. That's basically the bottom line of it. So speak with native speakers, okay? I will leave in the information box below the website addresses to 2 language exchange websites where you will be able to talk to people in your target language and exchange basically your language against theirs. So it's a win-win situation. Can't get better than that. And as far as I know, this website is free. I haven't used it myself, but I've heard very good things about it, so try it out. You should also listen to music in your target language and try to understand the lyrics. You could look for the lyrics on Google, and then any words that you don't understand, you could look them up in the dictionary. If the song is of interest to you, you're a lot more likely to memorize the vocabulary a lot quicker. Listen to music that you like and try to translate the lyrics, basically. Another thing that I always advise my viewers is if you want to watch something, if you're a very beginner and you want to watch something in your target language, start with cartoons that are aimed at young children. Now, that's what I personally do now that I'm learning Spanish, and I find it very useful. You could watch Peppa Pig, for example. That's what I watch. The reason it's a good idea to start with programs that are aimed at very young children is that the language is very well enunciated, so it will help you with the pronunciation, and also it will help you understand what is being said. So you should start with cartoons aimed at, say, I wouldn't say babies, but like children up to 3-4 years old. Then once you're confident with that and you can understand what is being said, you could move on to cartoons or TV series that are aimed at older children, and then move on like that until you can understand adult films. Now, if you're someone who don't like cartoons or who feels ashamed about watching them, maybe, what you could do as well is you could start with adult movies, but with subtitles in your own language, and then once you're confident you can watch it comfortably, move on to watching films in your target language but with subtitles in your target language as well. And then once you're confident with that, you can move on to watching films without any subtitles at all in your target language. Also, it's not a bad idea to watch the programs that you're watching more than once, because you're always going to hear stuff or understand things that you didn't the first time round. Something else that you might find interesting is reading in your target language. Now, you can read anything you like. It can be books, it can be magazines, it can be news article, anything, as long as it's in your target language. But again, if you're a very beginner, I would advise you to start with books aimed at youngsters and then move up to more advanced books as your confidence and your ability grows. Regarding reading, one exercise that could be useful for you to do is look for a news article about a world event in your target language. Read it until you think that you understand the gist of it, and then look for an article on the same subject in your own language and then see if you actually understand what was being said. If for any reason you can't really speak with a native speaker, one thing that I particularly like doing, but this is only going to be for people that are at least intermediate level, is to try to think about things that you would normally think about but in your target language, because doing that will highlight areas of grammar and vocabulary that you might still need to work on. Plus, like, when you actually realize that, hey, hang on a minute, I actually can say all those things in my target language, I must be making progress, well, it's a great feeling, because it's a definite confidence booster when you actually realize that you actually know more than you think you know. So, to sum up, first, learn the alphabet. Second, learn basic words and phrases. Third, learn the pronunciation. Fourth, learn more vocabulary alongside grammar. And to practice, make sure to speak with a native speaker as much as possible and ask to be corrected. Watch movies or cartoons in your target language with or without subtitles. Listen to audiobooks if you have access to them. Make flashcards. Read as much as possible in your target language. And write down new words several times if you think it will help you. And practice, 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 and do not be ashamed to make mistakes. And let's be honest, I'm sure that if you are a native speaker of English, you can tell that I've probably made a few mistakes on this video. But am I ashamed of it? No. Why should I be? I think I've come a long way. At one point, I didn't know anything, and I learned from my mistakes. That's what mistakes are there for. So learn from them. They're only mistakes if you basically give up or don't learn anything from them, isn't it? Aren't they? See? I told you. I do make mistakes. Bye, people. And thanks for watching.